Echo screamed as the Baroness triggered the implant buried in his neck, his body convulsing in agony. Daniel snapped, charging a guard, bloodied fists flying, as rebel gunfire tore through the trees like thunder. Amid the chaos, Echo's cage shattered, and for the first time, he stood free. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Daniel's hands trembled, not from fear but the sheer adrenaline still coursing through him. Vegas 6's acid rains had soaked his boots, eaten at the seams of his gloves, but he barely noticed. He was too focused on the delicate rise and fall of the creature's chest, the way its breath rattled like air trapped in glass. Up close, its scales shimmered faintly, as if catching light from a source no longer present. The wound over its ribs had clotted in a viscous crust that hissed where the rain had touched it. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't built to survive out here on its own. Inside the shelter, Daniel sealed the door behind them and pulled the thermal lights closer. The walls buzzed low, filtering out the background radiation, and the emergency generator ticked like a dying clock. He laid the creature gently onto the diagnostic cot, its body twitching with the occasional spasm. His fingers danced across the panel beside it, activating an old med interface that sparked once, flickered, and finally bathed the room in pale blue light. No known species came up on the scan. The system flagged it as uncatalogued. Daniel didn't care. He sterilized the surgical field, pulled out the nanostitcher. The wound was cauterized, badly. Amateur work. Burned nerves, scorched tissue. Someone hadn't intended to kill it outright. They wanted it to suffer. The realization settled in his gut like ice. The procedure took 78 minutes. No anesthesia. The creature never screamed. It just stared, blinking slowly, enduring. He found himself murmuring to it, soothing words he barely remembered learning. "It's okay, just hang on. You're not alone now. Not gonna leave you." The words weren't meant for it, not really. They were for someone long dead, someone who'd needed him once. When it finally drifted into unconsciousness, he collapsed into the chair beside the cot, hands covered in dried green blood. His chest heaved. For the first time since crashing on this godforsaken rock, he let the silence settle. Rain pinged softly on the roof. Then came a sound, a soft click, mechanical, deliberate, far off somewhere in the trees. Not natural. A patrol drone, maybe. Or worse. Daniel stood, every nerve on edge. The forest didn't care who you were, but someone out there did, and they were getting closer. Daniel sat in stunned silence, his breath shallow as Echo's words echoed through the confines of the crash shelter like a dropped weapon. The voice didn't fit the creature's form, halting, raspy, filtered through damaged vocal folds and deep trauma, but it was unmistakably articulate. Not a parroted phrase, not mimicry. A confession. "She made me watch." The glow panels cast a weak blue light across Echo's scales, now dulled and trembling. Daniel dropped to one knee beside him, instinctively reaching out. "What did she make you watch?" Echo flinched, not from the touch, but from memory. He curled tighter around himself, tail tucked under, claws twitching against the metal floor. His next words came slow, measured as if each syllable cost something. "She made me watch the others, before they were broken, before they screamed. Some were like me. Most weren't. They cried for someone to stop it. I cried too, but she laughed." Daniel recoiled, jaw tightening. His stomach twisted, not just from the cruelty, but from how calm Echo sounded, as if he had run out of tears long ago. The air in the shelter thickened, heavy with the weight of something unspoken. Echo looked up at him then, eyes not alien now, not even animal, just human enough to burn. They said we were property, tools, toys. She gave us names, then erased them. But I remembered mine. I held on to it. Inside. Daniel's voice was a whisper. Echo? A slow nod. That single word carried more than pain. It was defiance. It was survival. Outside, the forest crackled under the passing hum of another drone. Daniel moved with silent precision, dimming lights, masking thermal signatures. His hands moved automatically, honed by years of mechanical routine, but his mind burned. Baroness Elena Rourke wasn't just some tyrant. She was a collector of life, a desecrator of sentience. If Echo was valuable, it meant she wanted him back intact, and for someone like her, that only ever meant to continue the suffering. Daniel stared at the tiny form beside him and felt something shift. This wasn't a favor anymore. This was war, a personal one. He touched Echo's shoulder gently. You're not going back. I don't care who she is. Echo looked at him again, and this time he didn't tremble. The ground outside the crash shelter was soaked and steaming, the acid rain sizzling against metal and bark alike. Daniel lay half-submerged in the muddy clearing where they'd dragged him, his hands zip-cuffed behind his back, mouth thick with the taste of iron and ash. The blow to his jaw still rang in his skull, each breath like dragging fire through shattered glass. But his eyes, those were steady, fixed on the hulking enforcer who loomed above him, face half covered in grafted steel, voice reeking of programmed cruelty. You harbor the Baroness's property, the man repeated, slower this time, as if Daniel were deaf or dumb. Give it up, or you'll die screaming. Daniel lifted his head, lips split open in a grin that had no mirth. Not the first time someone said that to me, he muttered, blinking blood from his lashes. A boot drove into his ribs, and his body arched involuntarily. The pain flashed white-hot. He wheezed, coughed, tasted bile. Somewhere to the side, one of the drones clicked, scanning Echo's cage. He saw the creature now, crumpled, shackled, twitching, his small frame scorched from the stun blast, eyes flickering with the dazed confusion of someone yanked from sleep into horror. But what gripped Daniel wasn't just pain. It was rage, a slow, burning kind. The kind that didn't scream or flinch, the kind that calcified into resolve. They weren't soldiers, these things that dragged him from his shelter. They weren't men. They were tools, extensions of a hand too rich, too cruel, too far removed from consequence. Daniel had met people like that before, on orbital stations and mining colonies, people who thought survival made them gods. People like the Baroness. The enforcer crouched beside him, gripping Daniel's chin in cold, mechanical fingers. You know what she does to those who steal from her? Daniel stared back. No, he said hoarsely, but I know what she did to him. The fingers tightened. Then, you know he's not yours to protect. Daniel coughed once. Blood dripped from his lips onto the ground between them. He trusted me. And that, more than anything, was what made him dangerous. Because for the first time in his life, Daniel Harper wasn't fixing ships. He was standing between a monster and its prey, and he wasn't backing down. Smoke hung in the air like morning cloth, curling through fractured treetops, thick with scorched ozone and the metallic sting of blood. The clearing where the Baroness had tried to reassert control now lay gutted, bodies scattered, tech shattered, trees split open like ribs around a battlefield heart. Morning light filtered through the wreckage in shards, and within those cruel beams, Echo trembled. He sat hunched on the rebel skimmer, his skin mottled with burns where the implant had flared, his breath uneven but real. His eyes, once dimmed by captivity, now held something else, something raw and terrible and alive. They weren't the eyes of a specimen, not anymore. Daniel sat beside him, hand still clasped in Echo's small claws. He hadn't moved in over an hour, not since they'd dragged the two of them onto the transport. Not since Echo, through cracked lips and a throat that rasped with ruined wiring, had looked at him and spoken those three quiet words. Not property. I'm me. It hadn't been a declaration. It was a question wrapped in pain and hope, pressed into Daniel like a bleeding trust. And Daniel had answered not with rhetoric, not with speeches, just a nod, a quiet smile, the kind of smile you give a soul clawing its way out of hell. Now, as the medics worked on Echo, injecting healing nanites, scanning for residual neural feedback, Daniel watched every twitch of the creature's fingers, every micro-expression in that scaled face. The kid wasn't just healing, he was changing. Somewhere across the camp, the rebel captain barked orders, directing cleanup crews and coordinating evac. The Baroness's ship had taken a full reactor core to the underbelly. She'd barely escaped in a scorched shuttle, her elite guard reduced to ash and carbon. But she was alive, and Daniel knew what that meant. She'd come back. Wounded tyrants always did. The captain approached, boots crunching over slag. She eyed Daniel, then Echo, then the bond between them that no cage or collar could ever sever. You said you had no stake in this war, she said. Daniel stood slowly, pain lacing his every movement, but his voice was steady. I didn't. Not until someone made me choose between silence and a scream. She offered a grim smile. Then welcome to the resistance. Behind him, Echo stirred. The scars would remain, but so would the voice, and next time it wouldn't tremble.